Welcome to the Sanity Project podcast, the place for internet technology professionals whose work-life balance plan has imploded. We are here to provide solutions that will help the IT pro live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Here's your host, Joanne Victoria.
Hi, I'm Joanne Victoria, and I'm the host of the Sanity Project podcast. I partner with IT professionals in the telecommunications, technology, entertainment, and mass media industries whose work-life integration plan has imploded and who want more success, more confidence, more fun, and more inner peace. The Sanity Project podcast is a platform for experts in the personal development and IT communities to share their wisdom, expertise, and solutions that will help the IT pro live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. And we have one of those experts here with us today. For David E. White, studying resilience has not been out of curiosity or peripheral interest, but rather more like a wilderness hiker searches for the next water source while holding an empty canteen. Picture that, people. David was orphaned at an early age, married at 18, and threw himself into a vocational life with a drive to prove his value. His drive led to several successful startups, exponential sales growth, and miraculous turnarounds, and ultimately, burnout. David holds a Master of Arts degree in Interdisciplinary Studies, is a columnist in Sask Business Magazine, and is currently Chief Operating Officer of Legacy Group of Companies. And today he's going to talk about the 3 keys to resilience and the substance that holds them all together. Welcome to the show, David E. White.
Thank you, Joanne.
How are you today, David?
I'm well. I'm traveling a little bit. It's a sunny day, albeit cold, but no, I'm enjoying life, and it's a productive, prosperous season. So, yeah, it's good.
Good. So talk to us about these 3 keys to resilience. You have internal, external, and process, and the catalyst that works. Can you take us through a little bit of that?
Sure. Internal part is really deeply embedded in resilience theory. So, you can layman's interpretation translate internal as your own self-awareness, your self-talk. Be aspired to a little Viktor Frankl philosophy, the author of Man's Search for Meaning, Auschwitz survivor, and world-renowned psychologist. He would say it's that pause, that final human freedom, the space between our stimulus and our response. And in that space, when we choose our response, that's where our growth and our freedom lies. So that internal piece is really about self-mastery. And external becomes about sort of our environment, our community that we reside in, our supportive structures, for some it's explicitly and maybe only family, but for others it's also workplace communities, friends, and so on, that when your self-mastery is wavering, you have supportive structures outside of us. And then process is really about the kinds of things that you engage in. So on an individual basis, it can be sort of a methodology of the way that you practice things. Literally, when you think of process, it's the way that you engage life and work. And the beauty about all of this is that it kind of comes together within workplace settings that we come to experience things like, not to be too trite, but passion, purpose, and promise all kind of come together in our work settings. So, in other words, work gives us a way to access purpose. And as we access purpose, we develop more of an awareness of our potential, which is promise. When we look at children, we'd say, well, that child has a lot of promise. We're really speaking to the element of potential that they have in their life. And then passion is what we experience when we sense purpose and promise coming together in a way that we sense a bit of validation. As you read in the introduction there, speaking the introduction, I was thinking about how I discovered some of these things in my own life, and the need for validation, and so it drove a lot of the growth right at the beginning, and without some balance and awareness of kind of who I am as a person and a bit of grace applied there, that's what leads to the burnout. So we'll save a little bit of that for later, but just as a general introduction, internal, external, and process kind of work together like that.
So do you have an example of an individual, or do you want to use yourself as an example? Because people love stories. So if they hear something,
Sure.
It might, the words are great, and I admire them and also believe them. But I think if you have a vignette or something that you can talk about with an individual that went through, that you helped move through the process, or a group of people at an organization, one of your clients, teams, or something like that you helped move forward.
Sure. Well, I guess I could pull out a bunch of those. My personal story is always one that I fall back to, but maybe with respect to your group, I'd speak more in that corporate context here and talk about some of the activities that we're doing right now within Legacy Group.
That's great.
We have a very clearly defined mission and a clearly defined vision and core rank ordered values that we work with. But a lot of it comes down to the day in, day out application of cultural practices that support all those. And if you want to go straight to the heart of it, you look at trust. And so you're looking at trust as a decision, and you're working towards 100% accountability to live out trustworthiness and to choose to trust your coworkers. So when we're doing this in our companies right now, we have 100 employees at one location, and they have all kinds of different disciplines, and they're forced to come together and within that one mission, but they all do different jobs and work within different departments. And so how is it that we get beyond sort of siloed thinking and competition within the workplace to be something where there's more of a synergy and a harmony? And you can do some of that through coaching on the internal. In other words, what people tell themselves. So we do a lot of that. We have people that, if we weren't speaking to them from an authentic perspective about what their challenges were in life or what their present reality was, that, we would just be looking at them as sort of cogs in the wheel to get things done and disrespectful of their humanity. When you get to external and you're building a community, it's about embracing a larger community. And so how do you have supportive structures? Well, how do you see yourselves as being partners for each other's success? And can we be champions for each other? Can we be aware of when other departments are struggling instead of competing for resources? Can we have more of a one mission kind of perspective where we're all working together to achieve an end? And truly even stepping back to see when we've done it. Like we do quite a bit of almost weekly visioning sessions where we say, give us evidence of where we've seen our vision actually lived out. So in our case, we would be asking questions like, when did we see one of our employees have a direct impact in the life of one of our clients? And we would quantify that with specific questions. So you can ask that basic question in really simple language from lots of different perspectives. The intro is always, where do we see evidence of X? And you just insert components of your vision or your values or your mission into that. And so by doing that, you get an external development in the team being able to sort of almost like cross-fertilizing ideas as to what vision really looks like. And then the process, of course, is exactly what I'm talking about right now with, we call it calibration. So it's, great, you have mission, vision, values, and practices, but are you ever measuring or assessing where we're at? And we're not just talking about like pass, fail, it's about coaching towards success. And so as we've done this, over the last year and a half, we've seen a massive reduction in incidents. So we have incident reporting for our companies, and we've 75% reduction in incidents. We've seen a growth in community. We have Flapjack Fridays, which is something that I literally go and I cook flapjacks for the employees the last Friday of every month. And so that's started off kind of slowly, but you're looking at external. How can we make it explicit that nobody's here alone? So let's just back up for just a half a second and look at where the world is at right now. We know that anxiety is at an all-time high. We know that 41%, nearly 1 in 2 adults today will experience an anxiety disorder in their lifetime. Disorder, not just like I had a little anxiety, but actually having a disorder of it. We know that children have about the relative anxiety level on average what a 1950s or 60s psychiatric patient would have. So we have an anxious sort of culture within our society, and what we're looking at within our company is the opportunity to work with people who obviously come from that culture, that society, and trying to provide them tools for solid internal, external resilience, and how that comes together within the processes that we do within companies. So, those are real conversations. They're difficult conversations sometimes because you have to hold people accountable to a job that they're doing. But you're never doing that in relation to just the job or the technical aspects. You're always doing it in relation to, or within the context of them as a human, an organic human being with thoughts, feelings, emotions, dreams, aspirations, and yes, from time to time, anxiety. So that's what we try to do within our companies. You get people, when you do it well, they'll come along and say, this feels like my second home. And pointing to my supervisor, I overheard one of our employees saying, Jen here, she's like a second mom to me. So you can do it well and have that kind of impact.
That's interesting. I was having a conversation yesterday with a friend, associate as well, known her for a long time, and we were talking about how times have changed, where people seem to be different today as opposed to, and this is a broad view here, so this is not, for example, the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, people lived their lives. They did what they needed to do. Necessity became the mother of invention. Many things were invented early on, and that included concepts similar or in alignment with what you're trying to do, although probably on a much smaller scale, much, much smaller scale. And then in the 90s, things started to change where people were told that they were wrong about fill in the blank, ABC 1, 2, 3. And it got worse and worse and worse until today, people are being made wrong about many things, any choices that they make in the world. And it's that I think that not encourages, but that exacerbates the issue of anxiety, where people don't know which way to turn. And does any of that resonate with you?
Oh, it's like you're reading my mail, or we've been having conversations for years. Absolutely. We're eroding foundations of what truth is. So when you don't know what a foundation is, so take a diet, for instance. High-fat diets are bad for you. We should all go low-fat and eat lots of whole grains. Oh, wait, whole grains are bad for you because they're high in carbohydrate that converts to sugar. And so really you should eradicate all carbohydrates and eat high fat. And so, how many situations do we have that are like that? From a philosophical perspective, what we started to do was build, because we could do science well and research well, we started to build algorithms. But here's the problem: we have non-linear dynamic complexities in our world today that are unlike anything we've ever experienced. If you take a look at some of Thomas Friedman's writing in "Thanks for Being Late," I think it's the title of the book, he talks and illustrates about the rate of change based on the microchip, relevant to some of your listeners, I would guess, and how it's compounded exponentially year over year over year. And our ability and all of the implications of that, before I end there, just think about our inability to adapt to that kind of change. So by illustration, we're trying to figure out how to regulate Uber. And before we can figure out how to regulate them, we have autonomous driving vehicles. And, we just can't keep up with that. So we have a constant shifting of what's normal, a shifting of what's true, of what works. our algorithms aren't working as well. 100 years ago, how many PhDs were being offered at a college or university? A handful. Everybody knew what a doctor was. Now you can have a doctorate in nanotechnology, and I actually reveal my ignorance by using that, because that's probably passé as related to some of the newest doctors. It just goes on and on and on.
It's
so
like
how are we to keep
bad,
up?
It's like a bad joke that nobody gets.
Right. Right.
And I think that what you're doing in the offices that you're dealing with, and although culturally, if you're in Canada, mostly people are nicer and more willing to be open to receive, in my experience. And down here, it's a lot of challenging. Oh God, the challenging can be exhausting. So then I go back to what you said about trust, because if there is trust, there is less challenge.
Right.
And show me, prove it. It's like that's the society that we're about here, certainly in the Seattle area and Silicon Valley, and so on, places in the East Coast, etc. How do you make people, or is this the process that you told me about in the corporation that you deal with, including Flapjack Friday, which I, of course, would enjoy, as long as you had my butter imported from Ireland. How can you get people to trust each other? Because I think that is a huge thing right now, because trust is lacking in the universe on a macro level. And obviously people don't trust themselves, et cetera. They were never taught properly.
Sure.
Go through that, but we're dealing with what we're dealing with. So how do we take the seemingly adult person, and expect them to trust the person next to them on their team, in their office, when there's no reason to, because they've not been taught how to trust or what trust means in a conversation?
Oh, and add to that social media and how quick people can turn on the topic and challenge because of the anonymity or distance. Or we have a culture where it's never been more difficult, I believe, to trust. So, I might be wrong on that. I don't know if that's pure science, but it's definitely a gut instinct.
I believe it.
So trust, just in general, first of all, on the internal side, trust is a decision. You don't really, somebody doesn't really earn your trust. You decide to trust. You decide based on some metric, but you make a decision to trust, or you make a decision not to trust. So unless we embrace that as our first decision, that our first principle, that trust is a decision, it's like we go nowhere. We expect somebody else has to do something for us in order for us to trust them. And I think we just have to acknowledge right out of the gate that it's about a decision. But now on the external side, we have to have an environment that is trustworthy. And so one of the expressions that I heard a few years back is something that Alan Mulally started at Ford Motor Company. Now, he's one of my favorite CEOs of all time. But without going into all of why I think he's great, one of the quotes that I heard bounced around Ford when he was doing the restoration of Ford here post 2006, 2008 was, you can't fix a secret. Well, when you actually just think about that for a bit, just ruminate on it, what does it tell you? Well, if people are afraid, you never find out about what they did wrong, and so they bury it. So how do you fix it? It's like you have to have an environment that's safe enough for people to come forward with, I screwed up, this didn't work out, whatever, own it in the spirit of truth and deal with it. So to do that, you've actually got to have an atmosphere of 100% accountability, because if you don't have 100% accountability, and without getting too jargon-esque here, it's bilateral accountability, which means it's supportive accountability. We're accountable to and for each other as partners in each other's success. So if you don't have 100% accountability, it'd be like entering a marriage where it was like, well, 50% of the time you can scream at me, and the other 50%, I guess, well, that's pretty good. Make it 51, and it's a great day, So you got to have what is our goal or vision for this relationship? Is it true partners for each other's success or not? And you have 100%. And the only way that you can have 100% accountability is when you deal with the concept of grace. If you don't instill grace, then people are afraid to own their accountability. If you don't instill grace, then we can't even hold ourselves accountable. So as you said, we don't even trust ourselves a lot of times. Well, if we can hold ourselves with grace, say we'll be 100% accountable to the vision, the principles, whatever it is that we hold, and then say that when we make mistakes, we'll take this and stand in this safe space of grace, take responsibility for our actions, work to make them better, and move forward, engage back into our vision and our mission. So grace becomes that safety, that space, but it's not a space to abuse or manipulate or posture or anything. Grace is a space to take ownership without fear, because that's the only way you're going to get to 100% accountability. It's the only way you're going to get to trust. So when we live this out in our company, we literally talk in terms of 100% accountability. It's documented. It's articulated. Every week we talk about 100% accountability, but we also talk about in tandem at the same time grace. Because when you start talking about the concept of grace, it's freedom. You don't have to be afraid. All you have to do is own it. We'll work together to move it on. We're not going to hang anybody for making a mistake that they would own. We will all make them. Our code says when we fail to uphold our practices, not if. It's never a matter of if. It's just when. So how will we respond to that mistake? How will we respond to that failure? And as people start to get that, that's how they start to be able to make the decision to choose to trust. They say, I've seen this happen with somebody else. They own accountability for their actions, and this is how it played out. And so I have the confidence to make that same decision.
Yeah, I've just recalled, I said a synapses would fry in there, connect in there somewhere. Years ago, I was involved, I lived in Marin County in California, and I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's always about, still is about, hello?
Yep, I'm still here, you bet.
Okay, personal development. And there was a specific group where everyone had to be accountable. By being in the group, you had to be accountable to the others. And then if something occurred where someone felt, quote unquote, felt that you were not being truthful, they would bring it up at the next meeting. And then you had that space to expand on your position, because unfortunately, as most people do, they think you're talking about them when nobody really cares. It's like, I'm not going to go bowling because I don't bowl well. And then you realize nobody cares if you don't bowl well, because they're concerned with themselves and their own sport.
So true. You watch me on the dance floor. Okay.
Yeah, it's like, who cares? It's just not that important. But this is the safe space of grace is really, I think, an important factor here. Not the only important factor, but an important factor that people need to. And I'm sure you make it work for you and your company and your clients and the employees and contractors that work at these places, so that they feel safe. And I think that is, again, as you say, if you feel safe or in a state of grace or in a place of grace where you can speak your truth, then you will trust. You will trust the people who are helping you, and you will trust the people that you don't know quite as well. That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. You've actually articulated really well back, because it's when I look at relationships in our, I'm thinking of this one specific operation with the 100 employees that I cited earlier. I actually see that a lot of times it gets challenged. People are afraid, and we live in a society that is really quick to turn on other people, and just stick your head up with an opinion on something that's contrary to somebody else, and we can't have a discussion about it. It's like, it's polarizing, right? You're them, or you're not one of us, or whatever that looks like. And so we have all of those kinds of things going on. So we're sort of almost preconditioned to be judgmental and fearful of any kind of long-term commitment that might be vulnerable. So, if you read a little bit of Brene Brown's writing on vulnerability, you get a bit of an inside look into her life hacks and how people are so perpetually afraid to be vulnerable. And so we insulate ourselves from that. Well, what we're asking people to do inside of a workplace community is work very closely together. And if we're looking for optimal results in not just the product that we produce or the efficiency that we generate, but optimal results in the impacts that we've had on the lives of the people that have been working with us, then we're going to have to deal with how do we create an environment where it is truly safe to come to work and be able to engage. And so we've had employees that have looked, they've been up against a failure, And where they have said, look, that wasn't me. You're misunderstanding the circumstance, or, well, it was because I just had a bad night's sleep, or whatever it is. If you start deflecting and deferring, then we start working towards progressive discipline, because it's, what do you do with that? If we can't be assured that you're going to make your best effort to commit to this relationship, then we're doing you and the organization a disservice. And so really the only thing you need for an employee to be able to do in this context is to be able to take responsibility for their actions without fear. And then you work towards reconciliation and a process of bringing things back online.
And I'm sure, I have to assume, which I don't like to do, but that the companies that you charter with give you the time and space to get these results for them, that you don't have to.
Yeah, that's a big deal, actually. Good. That's spot on, Joanne, because that at times becomes a big question. So if you have a failure, it's not just that we had a failure internally. We had an external relationship. Now they have to choose to continue to trust us as an organization. And there have been times I've gone into meetings afraid that we might have done something that jeopardized that. And but we take that same spirit into those negotiations. So, when I go into that negotiation or discussion, my job is to own responsibility for our company's actions without defensiveness, without excuse and posturing and all that other stuff, without fear. And I have to choose to trust, regardless of whether or not the person on the other side is wanting to trust me, or wanting to wanting my head on a platter or whatever it is. Now,
sure,
we haven't had that. We've enjoyed that, but it's the same. The spirit's the same. Well said.
So if when you go to these companies, do you engage the hierarchy, the C-suite, whoever runs the company, in this new model of thinking that you're presenting to them, to their employees, so that they can be involved and engage with their employees after you leave?
Yeah, we do actually. In fact, we write it in. When we take out a contract proposal, we are very upfront with the kinds of companies that we try to collaborate with or serve. And in fact, I would say the central focus, the number one focus, is not about, if they're buying a particular service, it's, we're going to sell you that service and we'll perform that service for you. You need to know that we do it this way. And we're very clear about what we call 1-2-4, which is one mission where we stand 100% accountable to and for each other as partners in each other's success. It's a lot of jargon, I know, but that's a definition of our 1-2-4 methodology, which encompasses 100% accountability and grace. So and the reason we do that is we can't serve everybody. So we want to make sure that our value proposition resonates most strongly with the clients that we're going to end up serving in the future. So why not put that on the table right up front? Why not talk to them about the way that we view bilateral accountability, the way that we work towards workplace cultures, et cetera, so that they know right up front what they're buying.
Good. Do you have any final words for our audience? I usually ask what has been the advice or lesson that has stuck with you through life, but you've given me so many of them. And in your intro, the way you talked about resilience and how you came out of it, how many times? Oh, I'm going to ask you a final question. How many times did you burn out?
Okay. Well,
just
that's actually a very fair question. I'm going to say in varying degrees. I don't know how many, because what is a burnout, right? So there would be positions where I would go in and do a massive restructuring. Like I think of one company, we were losing $1.5 million a year on $6 million in sales. And to go in and turn that around and do it in 3 years, and that was great. But by the end of it, you just when you leave, it's like 3 to 6 months where it takes you that long till you feel like you're normal again. And those turnarounds, I think I'd say that the burnout was happening because I did those to validate myself. I had a counselor, actually. So another question you might ask is, how many hours of counseling have you been through? And that would be another one I wouldn't be able to answer. But one counselor said to me,
I hear the laughing.
So
that's
she,
okay. It's perfect. It's human.
No, No, it's exactly right. It's like, well, it's grace, right? I'll make better mistakes tomorrow. Like, I don't know. I didn't get to choose being orphaned at 12 years old. Like, so I don't, and that happened in two stages. I lost my dad when I was 7 and my mom when I was 12. So, moving different cities, all that stuff has an impact on your life. And then it's like, you still got to choose what are you going to do with it. And, then your own wiring, what kind of introvert, extrovert, all those kinds of things start to play into how you're going to bounce back or recover. But when I look at all of these things and how they merge together, it kind of comes together in this counselor's statement to me. So she says, "Look, Dave, you've been an overachiever." Mm-hmm. In fact, a lot of people look at your career and say, what are you trying to fix here, man? You shouldn't fix anything. Mm-hmm. And she's kind of smiled a bit. She says, "How's it working for you?" I said, "Not very well." So the problem isn't so much the activity. You can be, we still in our companies drive huge results. But we do it different, and I don't do it, now let me say it this way. I calibrate myself to ensure that I don't fall back to doing anything as a sense of external validation. So grace helps me to do that. So one of the things that I think about is, I had nothing to do with the creation of my life at the beginning, nothing. All of a sudden I'm conscious and aware and I'm moving about the earth. And so why do I fear? Why do I see or feel this need or sense to continually be something to impress somebody or something? It's kind of like I don't know. So I spend a lot of time thinking about things like that. And what I ultimately come back with is just have grace for yourself, man. Like the fact that you can breathe is an absolute miracle. And you blow through that every day with busyness and you haven't even captured the essence of the miracle. The fact that you can think or act or respond, all of those things are amazing. And we get caught up and overwhelmed in the busyness of the day and it stresses us out. And so we actually give ourselves to a life that is far less than the very essence of the life that we inherited when we took our first breath. So there's a lot of perspective challenge in here. So it's not about the busyness. It's about this inordinate sense of validation that we seem to be grappling with. And if we're not aware of it and it's crushing us, we need to step back and get aware of it and take control of it.
I appreciate that. I really wanted our audience, and I seem to be capturing an audience not only in the IT world, but outside of the IT world who listen to all of these podcasts. But I wanted them to know that burnout is not a one-time thing, that all of a sudden there's a miraculous cure, that it can happen over and over again if you just look at it about yourself, the exterior validation, because number one, that's never going to happen. There's never going to be enough if that's all you're looking at. It has to come from within. And you have to, treat each day as you say, you're able to breathe. It's a precious day. And, what is your plan? What are you going to do now? And how are you going to help others? Because I just think we all have ministries and that's where we're here to do. Well, I want to thank David. Well, that's it. This is your work. For me, my work is a ministry. I'm here to help people help themselves. And how I format it and how I reframe it through my life comes from a previous burnout or that's the way it works for me. If I burned out on something, I reframe. I have to with the new me.
Right on.
So people who are listening, go to David E. White, spelled as you would want it to be spelled, DAVID, middle initial E, White, WHITE.ca. And for those who don't know, that's Canada, not California. Not the country, not the country of California. I want to thank David for being here today, and I appreciate the background laughter because it was spontaneous and it added charm to the show, so you can thank whoever did that. And I will let you know when the episode is live, and I want to invite people to go to my website at askjoannevictoria.com. That's ASKJOANNE, Victoria like the Queen.com, and sign up for my newsletter and get a free copy of the True Self Handbook, a guide to transform your life. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sanity Project podcast. Please go to AskJoanneVictoria.com and continue the conversation on her podcast page. And get a free copy of her book, The True Self Handbook, a guide to transform your life. That's AskJoanneVictoria.com. Take care, and thanks for being here.